And welcome back to Yerushalmi Demai. We are holding at Mem Tes and Harav, and we're talking about fruit that grew in land belonging to a guy. So we're up to here. Rav Yonah, Rav Simon, Rav Shem, Rav Shubba, Levi, and a cat post solution to that guy. So you take fruit which is detached, which grew in a field, which a guy bought in Eretz Yisrael. Mafresh truma and trumas maseh mahalacha. You separate truma and trumas maseh mahalacha. Now mahalacha means it's potter min atara for maestros. It's chayav maestros rabbinically with Rabbanan. Okay, it's various like places in Chutz La'aretz where they were set aside various rabbinical master obligations. Right, so that's how the way Rav Shimon looks at it. But nice non lashevet, and you have to give it to the Kohen because Israel can't eat it. And then you can ask money from the Cohen for the trumas that you're giving him. So although you can't eat it, but you do own it. So you don't have to give it for nothing, you're allowed to sell it for money. Then Rav Shimon Levi continues, if you take fruit that's still connected to the ground in the Gosha field, again you have to be separating truma and trumas maseh with Rabbanan level, as we said. But no time l'shevet. Now you still have to give it to the Kohen, but now you have to give it for nothing, and you're not allowed to take any money from it. Why not? So, although here as well it's a Rabbanan chiyuv, but the din is different when it's detached, because when it's detached, the Jew has acquired it. In what level? Basically, when the Jew acquired it, was it before the chiyuv Rabbanan came about in the rishus of the guy? So when it came to Chiyuv Rabbanan, it was in the Jewish person's domain. So that's like the land of Israel, and they said, right, you have to give it to Cohen for nothing. So here the Jew has acquired it at an earlier level, as it were. So that's why there's more of a Chiyuv to give it, although it's still Rabbanan, but you can't ask for the money for it. Now the first din of Shubba Levi, you're buying fruit which is detached, you can sell it to the Cohen. Martin. So what's the source for this din? Okay. So the Gemara brings the pasuk, a source. Let's see. The Gemara's going to bring a drosha. We'll bring another drosha first, which is similar to the drosha we'll see soon. So it says, "He take chomeis ben Israel, when you will take from the Jewish people the maser, and you will separate the truma of Hashem maser from maser." So the pasuk tells me, for the Leviim that take maser rishon, you've got to give trumas maser to the Cohen. And the word Bnei Yisrael, we learn, Me'ez Bnei Yisrael ad Moisi, when you take from Jewish people, you have to separate Truma and Maseh. Ve'en ad Moisi miyad Kohuna v'Levia. But you don't have to take from Kohanim Truma and Maseh, and nor Maseh from the Leviim. Now, okay, that's one din. So although the fruit that, let's say, grows in the fields of a Cohen and Levi, you have to separate Truma and Maseh to remove the Tabel Isur, yeah? Nevertheless, you don't have to give that Truma and Maseh, which they separate, to other people. The Kohen can separate Truma Gedola and eat it himself. The Levi can separate Maseh Rishon and keep it for himself. Okay? So therefore they're allowed to keep that for themselves. Now the Gemara brings a drasha, which is a source for the kula we mentioned before. But as you know, if it's in Kadomer Belaza, Belaza says, Ki take Bnei Yisrael, when you will take Maseh from the Jewish people. So we learned Bnei Yisrael, when it's fruit that grew in the Jewish person's ownership, and mostly you have to take Truma and give it to the Kohen for nothing. Because there's Kicha and Haitzah, Ki Tikhu, that the Levi takes the Maseh for nothing, the Yisrael separates it, and separates Truma's Maseh from the Kohen. You don't have to give Trumas Maseh to the Kohen for nothing, miyad hagoy, from fruit that grew in the Gosha ownership. Because fruit that grew miyad hagoy has not got a din of kicha of Maseh rishon through the Levi for nothing, hasn't got a din of hotzah of Maseh to the Kohen for nothing, Trumas Maseh to the Kohen for nothing, and grew in the land of the guy. It is chayav Trumas Maestros, but you don't have to give them to Levi for nothing. Right? Okay? You don't give it to a Kohen or Levi for nothing. Okay? This is based on the idea, like the guy has a kinyan in Eretz Yisrael, right, to exempt the Peres Minat Torah from Masros. Okay, based on that, this is Rosh Hashanah is like an asmachta. You buy Peres Telushin from a guy. Yes, Trumas Masros Midrabanan. You don't have to get your potter from giving them for nothing. The Truma you don't Trumas Maseh, which you can't eat. You have to sell them. The Master Rishon is allowed to be eaten. You can eat it yourself. Okay. Some want to learn that Rishub and Levi actually holds that Rameh, that it does not remove the Torah obligation. That the Goyish ownership does not remove the Maaseh obligation in our Torah. And that Peiros that grew really are in our Torah Chayav Maaseh. If the Jewish person does the Gemar Malacha, right? The Gemar, the final part of the production. Right? If the final malach is with the guy, they're potter from the Torah. That's to do with the word degadcha, the digun, right? It depends on the final process. Who does the final process of production? Okay, there's a discussion on that. Okay. The Bavli brings kitikhu leis b'nei Yisrael. Something you have to give to the Cohen for nothing. Yerushalmi is mashma, the P'tur is with Truma Gedola. Okay, let's carry on. Ravacha. Bimei Ravosha Bikshu Lehimanos. There was a time in Ravosha's time they wanted to gather together Chachamim on Harav Melech, the Potrim and Amaistris, to exempt. Now Harav Melech at that time was in non-Jewish ownership. It was in the mountains of Yehuda, and it was definitely conquered by Ole Bavel. Nevertheless, it was in the hands of Goyim. So they wanted a pascha that any fruit there is all potter from Maestris. Okay, it was mainly in the hands of Goyim. They thought like Rav Shimon that a Goy has got a koyach to be mafkia, to exempt from Maestris. However, they said Yavar Rav Oshia, I bet Rav Oshia will make the decision. However, he didn't manage to get there in time, and it was just too difficult. They were probably all running away from the Romans. And they didn't get around to making this agreement. Okay? Some say this is Rav Oshia, who was the days of Yehuda Nesiah the first, who died around the year 4000. Therefore, this was within 172 years after the Churban Bayis Sheni. Okay. In Bavli, in Gittin, it talks about all the cities that were in Har HaMelech and how the thousands and millions of people that lived there, right? By the time we're talking now, everything had been destroyed. And in this time now, in Har HaMelech, there were no Jewish people left, or hardly any. Now, Rabbi Yehuda bar Pazi, B'Shem Rav Oshia. Now, he said, Halacha K'Rav Shimon, that a guy has a koyach, the guy has a kinyan in the land to exempt it from Maestris. So, like, had Rav Oshia not passed on that Rav Shimon clearly, what would we have thought? Do you honestly think we would have said that Rav Shimon, the halacha should not be like Rav Shimon? Is that what you would have thought? We always have a cloud Rav Shimon against Rav Meir. The halacha is always like Rav Shimon. So what's Rav Oshia telling us here? So Ella, he says, begin to tell me because it says in the Brayso of Rav Shimon Chizuri, Maaseh Shinsav V'Peres Tevulin V'Peiraisai, Tevel got mixed up with my fruit, which was Chulin, which rectified Chulin. Sha'alti is Rav Tav, I asked Rav Tav what to do Barman, and he said, say V'Loichem, go and acquire, or go and correct the Peres that you'll use from Maestris Min HaGoy. So go and get fruit from the Goy, but Aser, and take Maser from the fruit that you get from the Goy, Alehen, on this mixture of Tevel that you got mixed up with your Chulin. So use other Goyish fruit to correct your mixture here. So according to Rav Tafan, the fruit of a Goy is Tevel Min HaTorah, and you can separate the fruit of Eretz Yisrael. And you see, Rav Tafan holds the Goy has not got the koyach to be mafkia the Chiyuv Meiser, and that's like Rav Meir. We learned in this brayso that if the fruits of the guy, of the land of the guy, is Chaim Meiser and Torah or not, Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon over him, they said no. Yesh kinyan l'goy b'Yisrael l'potrim and Masechet. He does have the power to exempt the Meiser obligation. So there's an argument between Rav Meir and Rav Tafan on one side, and you've got Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon on the other side. So Deloitis don't honestly say trade or cover trade, or it's 2 against 2. You've got Rav Meir and Rav Tafan in one corner, and they hold that the guy has not got koyach to pater from Maser. Yehuda Rav Shimon on the other side, who say yes, the guy has got koyach to pater, so it's 2 against 2. So you wonder who's in Paskin like. The from case of Loma, that's why Rav Oshia comes and tells you the halacha is like Rav Shimon. Yeah, halacha is like Rav Shimon. That what? That a guy has a koyach to be mafkia, to remove the master obligation. It's all very well Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon when they argue with Rav Meir. Rav Tafan holds like Rav Meir. Maybe you think halacha is like that. But that's what Rav Oshia says, no, the halacha is like Rav Shimon. Okay. Right. Now we also said that Rav Oshia passed on halacha like Rav Shimon. Now we bring another proof that that's halacha. But I've been Hadar, so I'm Rav Zira. Oh, we got a story for you. Okay, you listening carefully? Then we shall begin. Abba Antuli. So what have we got here? Abba Antuli, Zavim Peri B'Darmai. So Abba Antoli, he bought fruit from a non-Jew. Asked the Gabe to Yehuda ben Levi. He comes to Yehuda ben Levi to ask, does he have to take Maser or not? Shalach lemnachem bereid yitakene. So Yehuda ben Levi gets the question, do I have to take Maser on this fruit? So what does Yehuda ben Levi do? He sends his son Menachem. Okay? He tells Menachem, you go there to Abba Antoli's house, and you go and you be Maser, take Maser on the fruit. So sure enough, Menachem listens. He takes Maser on the fruit, by his father's command. But Yav le Masre, and who does he go and give the Maser to? He gives it to his father. The one who sent him, the Rav who got the sack, the Rav who had the question, said he sends his son, and the son goes and takes Maser and gives it to his father. He gives it to his father, Yehuda ben Levi. The Maser is that he separated from Antuli's fruit. So the Truma and Truma's Maser he separated. Yehuda ben Levi was a Cohen, and he took on, he wasn't going to pay anything to Abba Antoli. He got the fruit for nothing. Now you see, he holds that Rameh, that a guy has not got Kayach to remove the Maser obligation, and the fruit that grew in his field are Chayav Maser Minat Torah. Therefore, Antoli, who acquired the fruit from the guy, was Chayav Minat Torah to give it to the Cohen for nothing, for Truma and Truma's Maser. So therefore, that's why the Rav gets the Maser. He doesn't give any money. He takes the Maser for nothing. Miyasi, when Menachem comes back to his father to bring him the Truma Gedola, Truma's Maser, which he separated from Antoli, he comes to him, and Rabbi Shimon Levi. Rabbi Shimon Levi comes. Rabbi Shimon Levi says to Menachem, Man yabida el avuch. Who does something apart from your father? So Rabbi Shimon Levi, so it was him. He bought the fruit from the guy. He comes to Yehuda ben Levi, right? Okay, and Yehuda ben Levi sends his son. The son gives the Maser to his father. So now Rabbi Shimon ben Levi gathers someone else, Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, and he says, Man yabida el avuch. Only a father could have done that. So the question comes. So Maser needs taking. What does he do? He sends his son to take the Maser. And who's the son given to? The father who sent him. So he says, your father is such a chacham to do something like this. Now, Rabbi ben Levi praised the din of Rabbi ben Levi, that the Cohen took this truma for nothing. Okay? Now, you see that he also held, like Rameh, that a guy has not got the ability to be mafkia from Maisrus, so he said the Cohen can take the truma and truma's maser from his fruit for nothing. Okay? Now, what they bring here, Rabbi ben Levi, who got the maser, he didn't pay for it. Otherwise, big deal, he got the fruit. Yeah, maybe he paid for it. He's saying, no, he didn't pay for it. Right? He didn't pay for it at all. Okay? Now, idea, why does it not look good? What's happened over here in this story? It doesn't look good. Why not? Because it looks like the Cohen is Messiah of it. Cohen's not allowed to stand around in the threshing area. Give me Maser. Give me, stands there in front of everyone. Give me Truma, whatever. You can't do that. He's down there, he'll help in the threshing till he'll get Truma and Maser. It looks like he's taking it as a wage. The Torah says they gave it as a gift, not as a wage, right? Not for their work. Okay? So here, like a Cohen can't tell Israel, give me the Truma that you have, because you've already separated it, and I'll separate Truma from my fruit on your fruit to be masak in it, whatever you can't. The issue is if you help him to receive the gifts. If you have friendship, then a Cohen who's helping and Israel gives to the Cohen, that's okay, that's fine, he's allowed to take the matanos. So here, Menachem didn't really take Maser for Antuli to receive the gifts, to receive the Maser. But Antuli was coming to his father to ask the question. Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi wasn't sure if Antuli would do it, right? So he asked his son to do the mitzvah. Okay, it wasn't really connected with receiving the gifts. And Antuli actually, he was doing Menachem what he separated. He was already in the house. He didn't have to look after anyone else to give it. There's no issue here, the fact that Menachem took it himself, but it doesn't look brilliant, but it's okay. There was not really a problem here. So what have we got now? So we're saying, you see from Shimon Levi, he held like Rameh, that a guy has a Kohen, is not mafkia from Maestros, so he holds the Kohen is allowed to take Truma and Dovid from his Maser, which was separated the fruit for nothing. And now we're going to ask a contradiction from somewhere else from Shimon Levi. And we'll see this contradiction. Let's see. We have a contradiction. Over there he says, you take the tap stuff from the guy, mafish truma, you separate truma, truma's maser, ma'alacha, rabbinical, and you give it to the tribe, no son of the you give it to the Cohen, but you're allowed to charge for it. Okay? You can't eat it, but you give it to them, but you're allowed to charge for it. Here he says that he agreed to the dinner of and Levi, that Yisrael has to give it to the Cohen for nothing. Who said you can charge for the truma, right? He didn't say this, Ella, when it was, this is the story of Miasi, when Menachem came back and told his father, right, he comes back to his father to bring the truma and truma's master which he separated, and then Rav Shimon Levi got up, Rav Shimon Levi said to Menachem, Les ilei davuch, this fruit doesn't really belong to your father for nothing. You took it for him. No, but basically you have to pay Abantuli for this fruit. Truma Gedola you took from him. Right? Because a guy has a koyach to be mafkia, to remove the master obligation. And until he didn't really have to give it to Cohen for nothing, or the Truma Gedola Truma's master. The Ipid, I'm sure that Levi got cross. The fact that Yehuda Levi took the Truma and Truma's master without paying. Why did he take it without paying? And based on this version, Rav Shimon Levi in this story fits in with the words that this fruit is Chaim Moshes with Rabbanan, and the Jew is allowed to take money from the Cohen for this truma that he's giving. Right? This is another proof that Allah is like Rav Shimon. So what we said, based on this version, he's allowed to take money, so that shows you can't remove. That basically that shows if you can take money, it means there's no chiyuv obligation to give maaser from that Torah, right? That's what we see over here. So it fits in like Rav Shimon. Allah is like Rav Shimon, that the guy is mafkia. He removes the chiyuv bin Torah giving maaser. Now, we carry on to Rav Shimon Levi about a kinyan of a guy in the land of Eretz Yisrael. It should be Shnai, chain master, and 2, take master on tevel of others, without the owner knowing about it. His tevel got mixed up in a majority of chulin that min Torah's brought to arrive, but Rabbanon, he still needs separate trust masters. You take from the marketplace of the kutim. So here the tevel of Chaim Meisus with Rabbanon, we're worried, you won't worry about the Tkonos Chachamim, you won't take the owner, you won't take master. So we allow others to be mafish truma mass on this fruit, even if the owner doesn't know about it, in order to save from eating tevel with Rabbanon. Harav Zira says about the second din that he heard the name of Shubba Levi. Harav Zira says, you're not going to take money for that truma which you separate from this fruit, like it grows in the land belonging to the guy, and the Jewish person finishes the process. But in Mamahat, if you're going to tell me you're going to take money for the truma and truma's master, right? Well, then why is it a case of taking shlei b'shus? Hari b'shus Torah. It is with permission. The owner is allowed to take money from the Cohen for these gifts. There's no loss. In fact, someone else separated truma and truma gedola from this fruit. So therefore he's happy that someone else be mafish for him. And if he's happy about it, the kalis you can do as a chus for someone, even if he doesn't know about it, as if he gave him clear permission to go ahead. Okay. He says here, according to Zira, Rashub and Levi holds that if you buy Paris Telushin from the land of a guy, you have to give the trust maestros for your mafish to Kohen Levi for nothing, like Reb Zira. And Rashub and Levi praised on Haggadah of Yehuda and Levi. You didn't have to pay for the truma of the master you received. And not like Reb Simon. Okay. Now, our Mishnah also allowed, the Tanakama allowed you to take maser from fruits which were bought from one kuti on paris which were bought from another kuti. Now, Rabbi Elazar forbade you to be mafresh maser from the paris of one kuti for another one. Okay? Now, the reason that the Tanakama, I understand, why do they forbid it? Because most kutim don't take maser, what they sell to others, and the din Torah you'll follow the Rov. So you're buying from a kuti, but a Torah is probably tevel. Therefore you can be maser from one kuti, from another kuti. It's all tevel. But according to Rabbi Elazar, why does he not allow you, Mekar Harav, to take maser one bit from another? The reason for Rabbi Elazar is Demai. Just like they treated the fruit of Eretz Yisrael bought from Amaretz, Demai, Acharuba, for the majority of Amaretz, most people take Maser. But nevertheless, Ein Tovin and Ma'asrin, Zeh al Zeh. You can't take Truma and Maser from one Amaretz for another one. We're worried maybe one took Maser and one didn't, right? And we don't say, when Minat Torah it's got the same din. The Rov decides that they're all taking Maser. So now the Chacham are obligated with Maser, they all have the same din. Maybe you can take Maser one from the other. But no, we don't say that. We say every Amaretz is a Sophic in his own right. Did he take Maser? Maybe he didn't take Maser. You follow? Kach Asa, so also the Chacham did Peres Kuti, Vadai, that if you got fruit from a Kuti, which is Tebel, Vadai, Acham Ruban, you'll follow most Kutim who don't take Maser. But nevertheless, you cannot take Truma Maser from the fruit of one Kuti Zeh for another Kuti. We don't rely on the Rov to give the Peres the same din and treat it as they're definitely not taking Maser. We said no. We have to worry on every Kuti separately. Maybe he's some of the minority who take Maser and his friend doesn't take Maser. So basically you can't take Maser from one Kuti for another. Okay. Now, if you have a plant pot with a hole gets nourishment from the ground. Yes? So it's considered growing. Now, if, however, you have an otzitz, so that's an otzitz knockoff. So yeah, an otzitz knockoff is considered connected to the ground. And if you take truma from fruit that grew in a plant pot with a hole, that's considered like the ground, 100%. Now, if you took truma from fruit that grew in an otzitz and a plant pot, which has not got a hole, on behalf of a plant pot with a hole, yeah, then the din is, it's truma, but you've got to take truma again. Because minat Torah, a plant pot with no hole is not considered connected to the ground. Okay? It's not considered connected to the ground. So therefore, if you took from that, you're taking from tur for chiyuv. So it's a problem. So if you did use that to take truma, then you'll have to go and do it again. If you take truma from that with a hole for that which is not got a hole, again, Harav is truma, but you have to take truma semaishus. Minat Torah, you bring mafish from chiyuv or p'tur. So let's discuss this now. We treat it as if it's got a hole. Now this is the Yerushalmi shita. It's not in the Bavli. In Bavli, a flower pot without a hole is a Rabbanon din. It's not connected to the ground at all. Rabbanon din. Yerushalmi, however, says that an otzitz without a hole is a doubt. It's a doubt. We don't know. Can you take truma from that which grows in a whole flower pot with a hole? Or is it like the ground? We bear machmir. So the Mishnah says, look, if you take truma from that without a hole, for that with a hole, misafek, our doubt is considered taking from tur for chiyuv. When you take truma from a hole for not a hole, it's considered, it's like a sofek taking from chiyuv for tur. So basically it's got a different status. The flower pot without a hole is a different status and it's a sofek. We'll soon get there, Rabbi. We'll soon get to Chaim. If you have a flower pot with a hole in a vineyard and you sow grain in it, the grapes, the vineyard, the grain are all forbidden for Chaim because the nourishment goes to the ground through the hole, as if it grew on the ground of the vineyard. But a flower pot without a hole, it's just lying there, the grapes and the produce is not forbidden. Right? If it's a flower pot which has not got a hole, then it's not considered. The grain, in other words, what's a grain that grows in a flower pot which doesn't have a hole is, he says, they're not considered. How are we doing this? If it's not got a hole, you put grain in there and it's in the vineyard, it doesn't become forbidden, basically. Because the grain that grows in a flower pot which has not got a hole is considered detached from the ground. It's not connected to the ground. You follow? We see from the Mishnah, there's no doubt that the tvur, which is an otzitz, a flower pot, has not got a hole, it's considered as growing in the ground. It's considered as if it's in a box. Basically, if there was any suffix about it, everything would be forbidden out of doubt. So what do we see? We see now that Otzis Nakuv, we've learned elsewhere. We said, we're not sure what it is. We've learned elsewhere that a flower pot with a hole, basically everything becomes forbidden. Otzis Nakuv, right? With a hole, everything becomes forbidden. So the answers this suffix. So the grapes and the produce is all also out of doubt. But the Mishnah says Otzis without a hole doesn't forbid. It means it doesn't kaddish min Torah. It's not like a definite flower pot with a hole, right? It's us is out of doubt. That's what we're saying. We treat this Otzis she'ena nokov as a suffix, okay? And as I said, it's not in Bavli. The Bavli argues an asugya. The Bavli holds if it grows in a flower pot without a hole, it definitely does not get nourishment from the Torah. And min Torah is considered in a box. So why does it have some dinim of truma? Why? It grows in a box. So he says, no, the Bavli doesn't learn it's a suffix. Yerushalmi learns it's a suffix. The Bavli doesn't learn it's a suffix. The Bavli says, Gezerah Rabbanan. We give it sound dinim. Like an Otzis Nakuv. We don't want to be lenient with the Otzis Nakuv proper. We don't want to be lenient with a proper one with a hole. So we're strict even one without a hole. You understand? So it's a Gezerah. That's why we're strict to one without a hole. That's how Bavli looks at it. Here we're saying it's a suffix in our Torah. Whether it's getting nourishment or whatever. Right? Over there in Bavli, you have Masechet with Rabbanon. You shouldn't have to end up having fruit which grew in a one with a hole without taking Maseh. The Rav Sarilia says the halacha is not like the Yerushalmi. Halacha, if it grows in a flower pot without a hole, it's not considered min Torah growing in the land. And if you uproot on Shabbos something growing in a flower pot without a hole, you do not have to bring an Oshon Toloi. And a flower pot without a hole, it's got grain, would not forbid a vineyard, as they did Klai. Okay? Right. So there we are. The one answers with suffix. When the Mishnah says Otzis she'ena nokov, it doesn't forbid, means it doesn't forbid min Torah, like Otzis Nakuv, but it only forbids misofik. Now, Tara, if you separated Trumas Maser from Demai, which let's see, got it from Amaretz, for the sake of Demai al Vadai, etc., either on Demai, Maser on Demai, or Demai al Vadai, so then it is Truma, or Trumas Maser, out of doubt, and maybe you're Mafresh Chiyuv for Chiyuv, and the Hafrosha works, and then you have to go and take Truma again on what you've used to separate. So you have to separate again, maybe you took Patur for Chiyuv, so then you didn't pater what you separated. And then the Mishnah says, if you took Trumas Maser from Tevel for Demai, the Cohen can't eat the Trumas Maser he separated until he has to separate Trumas Maser and Masras, because maybe the Demai was Ma'usa, maybe it was Mafresh Chiyuv for Patur, and there was no Chal. So the Gemara says, why the Mishnah doesn't need to tell me that you can be Mafresh Truma Masras for the Truma. The Mishnah never, the Mishnah never said that, let's say, you have to separate Truma and Maser for the Truma. Let's say if you're separated Demai from Demai, you don't have to separate the Trumas Maser on the Truma that you separated from Demai, right? We don't go so far. So he says, Gemara Tema, just like you say that if you're min Avadai al Demai, definite Tevel for Demai, we said is valid, Truma said Truma, but the Kohen can't eat what he's got until he himself separates the Truma Maestros. But Amar, we should say the same thing with the Demai al Demai case. The same thing should apply. The Mishnah should have said, don't eat the Truma till you're mafresh, let's say, Trumas Maestros. We should worry maybe you're mafresh min Chiyuv. Maybe this Amaretz that you got it from, maybe he took Maestros already. Right? We don't know. Or it could be, it's Tevel, but maybe for P'tur. Maybe what you separated for it was already Maestros taken. But the Mishnah does not say that Kohen can't eat the Truma until he takes Maser on it. So let's see this again. So Kamada Tema Vadai. If you take from Vadai Vadai al Demai, it's Truma, but then you can't eat it until separating Trumas and Maestros. Let's say the same thing. We should have said the same thing. You shouldn't eat it until you separate, Trumas and Maestros. Maybe we're worried. Maybe you're Mafresh Chiyuv for P'tur, whatever it is. right? Why does the Mishnah not say, oh, the Cohen can't eat it until he takes Maaser? So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Bun Bar Achia b'Shem B'Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yitzchok. There's a very suffix from the Maaser Shal Demai. This tells me, when you've got a mixture of Trumas Maaser of Demai, right? You separated Trumas Maaser from Demai for other Demai, which is now a suffix Trumas Maaser. And you got a suffix, maybe there's a bit of Demai as it was. It's treated as suffix Dimua, like a mixture of Truma and Demai, which has got a din of a suffix Truma, and Potter min Demai. It's actually exempt from Demai. So just like Demai, which becomes mixed with Truma, we exempt you from separating the Maestris of Demai. Right? Because you have to treat it with Kedushas Truma out of doubt. Okay? So also Demai, which you separated from Truas Maaser on other Demai, becomes a suffix Truas Maaser, and the Chachamim exempted it from Chiyuv Maestris of Demai, although there's a doubt maybe it remains Demai as it was, but you have to treat it with Kedushas Truma out of doubt. Right? As opposed to when you're mafresh vadai for Demai, right? Definite for Demai. So there, they didn't allow, just like they weren't lenient with Tebel that mixed up with Truma becomes Meduva. You know, we didn't say, oh, you don't have to mafresh Trumas and Maestris of Vadai. We didn't say that. Although there is a bit of this mixture, there is some Truma here. So they weren't Mekel, right? They said you still have to separate Truma, Master, everything. So similarly, they weren't Mekel when you're separating out of doubt Trumas, Master on Demai, and they didn't patter you from separating Trumas and Maestris. Maybe it was a Hafrosha from Chiyuv, from P'tur, which wasn't B'chal, and it remained Tevel as it was. So what we want to say is that there's still a Chiyuv, right? They didn't exempt you in all cases. So Vadai al Vadai, they still kept you with certain various obligations. Whereas the Dimua, a mixture of Trumas Master of Demai, right? So Truma and Demai mixed together. It's got a din of Sophic Truma, then we said it's potter from Demai. Just like Demai becomes Meduma, the Chachamim potted from Chiyuv Maestris of Demai, because you have to treat it as Kedushas Truma out of doubt. Okay? Right. Some say the reason why Meduma, when the mixture is potter from Demai, because of the Kula the Chachamim had with the Zakam of Demai. Since you have to give it Kedushas Truma, they will make or to patter it from Chiyuv Demai. Okay. Okay. Now we're talking about Hafrosha Trumas and Maestris from fruit where you are a partner with others. Okay? Now we have various land workers, right? We have an Oris, we have a Choker. Now Oris is the one who he works on the land, he gets a proportion, a fraction of the grain, a fraction of the produce, a sharecropper, right? Based on whatever the condition was. A Choker is he takes on the field for an amount of fruit, regardless of how much it actually creates. Whether the field produces a lot or a little, okay? He's going to pay a standard fixed amount. Doesn't matter how much the field produces. So that's the Choker. So Mekama Sadeh b'Yisrael. You're a sharecropper from a Jew of an Anachri, like Guzi, Chaylek Lifnei. Then you take your share, and you give them their share as it is. You don't have to take the Truma out and take Meiser out. It's nothing to do with you. Okay? Nothing to do with you. Now, what about the Choker now? The one who took on for a fixed sum. Now, there's a difference between taking a land from a fixed sum from a Jewish owner or from a Nachri or Kuti. A Choker Sadeh Israel, from a Jew for a fixed sum, Torah. You have to separate Truma Gedola from all the produce, and you give the Balasada his portion. His Truma, you'll have to give him his portion. You don't have to separate Maestris for the Balasada, before you don't separate your own before you give it to him. Just like the Oris, the sharecropper doesn't have to do it. Now, why you have to separate the Truma? Because they used to separate Truma Gedola while the fruit is still in the Goren in the field, and when you cannot take fruit from the Goren to pay back your amount that you have to pay the farmer, right? Then you have a Chiyuv Hafrosha at that point, as opposed to Maestris, which they used to be mafresh after they bring it into the house. So basically, the Truma obligation came earlier, and that happens in the area where it is. So therefore, you can separate the truma bit, but you don't have to separate the ma'aser for it. Okay. Now, when is it the one who's chayker? He does not have to separate maestros for the owner of the field. Is manchanas and lie when the balabais, the owner of the field, has given him he's given him. He's given him. Who's given who? He's given to the owner of the field fruit from that field, from that type. If the worker is paying from another field, you follow? If he's paying from another field, even that species which he agreed with the owner, or some other species, even though it's in that field, as he agreed to give him wheat, and he ended up planting in that field a bit of wheat and barley, and he paid barley to the value of the wheat. Ma'aser, the person who's chayker takes ma'aser on the maestros from the fruit, and he gives it to him after ma'aser has been taken, and he's not allowed to give to the owner of the field fruit which has not had ma'aser taken. You follow that? So when do we say he's positive for mafresh? When he's doing everything, is carried out, that agreement, that species, whatever. But if he's paying back from another field, then or another type, then he does have to take ma'aser first and give it in a tithe state. Okay? Now, if you take on a field from a guy, you have to take ma'aser first and then give him his portion, and you're not allowed to give fruit which is not ma'asered, and we'll see the reason on this. And Yehuda adds there are cases where even an oris who gets a field from a nachri has to be mafresh the maestros for the guy as well. If you get as an oris, a sharecropper, your father's field and in his family field from a guy because the guy stole it from a Jew and he gave it to, let's say, the son of the victim to work there as an oris. Then this oris, you have to take ma'aser and give the guy his portion, and you can't start giving him fruit which is not ma'aser. It's a kalas chachamim. We want it to be difficult, this ma'aser position, and for that you will push yourself and buy the field back from the guy because it's the family heirloom, and therefore it's beloved. You won't want to leave it with the guy. Okay, so you will have to ma'aser v'lo. Now, we said, if you receive a field from a Jew or a guy, you don't have to take truma or ma'aser for the chelek of the owner of the field, just chelek lifneim. So what's this? Zudi Rav Shimon Gamliel, this view of Rav Shimon Gamliel, according to Chachamim, if you take a field from Israel, chelek, you sort of divide it up. But if been a guy, Tyrene, you have to separate truma for the owner of the field's share before you give it to him. But a tiny came, we've also learned in the Brisa, become a son of a guy. If you receive a field from a guy, Tyrene, you have to take truma, but nice and light, and give the owner of the field his portion. And this is the view of the Chachamim. But Yerushalmi Demai Daf said, the guy doesn't have to take truma. He doesn't have to take truma of his fruit. You think he's not allowed to decide he's not interested? He's not mechuyev in separating truma and ma'aser. So also, if you receive a field, you don't have to take truma for the guy. And you sort of divide it, leave it before him. It comes out like our Mishnah that we're pattering the oris from taking truma for the guy's chelek. And that is like the view of Yerushalmi Demai Daf. Okay? Right. So it's not the same as Mekabel from Israel. Receiving it from Israel, you don't have to take truma. You don't have to take ma'aser for the owner of the field. When you receive it from a guy, you have to take truma for the owner of the field. Some say the reason is, if you don't take truma for the owner of the field, you're like selling tevel. You're stealing the share of the Cohen. Okay? Right, let's carry on. Now the Gemara brings a discussion between Amoraim about separating truma and ma'aser from the guy's produce, and it's connected to a brisa we mentioned. It brings the story of Rabbi Yanai. There was the era of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Yanai. It says we're separating truma and ma'aser. It could have said Tarimu Atem. Why did it say Gam Atem? The word Gam is the Rabbi Shluchachem, to include your agent, right? You can have a Shliach, like the owner. Ma Atem, and just like you can be Mafresh Truma and Ma'aser, B'nai Bris, the members of Klal Yisrael, Al Shluchachem, B'nai Bris. So also whoever you send can be a Jew, but not a guy. A guy can't be a shliach for Trumas and Maestras. Also, we learn for the word atem. Atem is a shliach. You can be a shliach to separate Trumas and Maestras, but a guy is a shliach. A guy cannot. You wanted to say a guy is a shliach beyond achecha veira. A guy can't be a shliach through another guy. A guy can be appointed. A guy can appoint a Jew as a shliach. That's what you think. Harav Zeira, he says no. But we know from that very drasha we see no. It says atem oisin shliach. You can make a shliach b'lai b'Yisrael, and it means sure who the shliach is a Jew. Of course, the shliach is a Jew, but the guy can't be a shliach. So what does it mean? So here as well, the sefer, what it means is ein a guy is a shliach afilu b'Yisrael. A guy can't do a shliach even with a shliach Yisrael. Right? The guy can't make a shliach. Okay, so we go here. Right, okay. Now, Rav Osha proves from a brisa, like the view of Rabbi Yosef, that a guy can make a Jewish shliach for separating Truma and Maaseh. So we've got other opinions. Hazir Rav Osha, Mahavas Nisa Messiah Rabbi Yosef. The following brisa supports Rabbi Yosef. Avisham Gamliel. Man Yitzchok has a shalali tribe. Look, he doesn't want to take Truma, he doesn't have to. In a time, he doesn't have to take Truma. So therefore, the Oris is patur if he gets a field from a guy to separating Trumas and Maaseh for the portion of the owner of the field. Because the owner of the field has no obligation in separating Trumas and Maaseh. His implication is, if the owner of the field wants to take Truma, then the office can be mafresh for his share. So you see, a Jew can be a shliach for a guy to separate Trumas and Maaseh. And that's like Rabbi Yosef, so a Jew can be a shliach. Rabbi Bar, he says, a guy can't make a shliach, even a Jew. Now that which he says in the brisa that the Oris can be mafresh for the owner of the field, who's a guy, is talking about a case, the Mamin al Yodo. The guy agrees to the hafrosha of the Oris and fulfills his words, as if he himself is doing it. Right? It's not mitam shlichus, but it's as if he himself is doing it. Okay, Rabbi Sam, we'll stop here, yeah?